as they come in. There we go. You should have heard something that lets you know that we are starting to record. If you do not want to be recorded, you can take your video and audio off as well. And we will be sharing this later on after the webinar is over. Next slide. We are also live streaming this to Facebook Live on our MAPC page. So if for whatever reason the call drops, you can also use that as another way to access this presentation. So I'm just going to give a little bit of housekeeping. If there are any disruptions at all throughout this presentation that we can't get a handle of, we will close the webinar down, and then we'll send you some follow-up information afterwards about rescheduling. We do want to hear all your questions, and so throughout the presentation, we please ask that you put in your questions in the chat box, and we'll be taking a look at them. That way we can address them in the last 20 minutes or so. And we will be sending this presentation and any links that are messaged, as well as an evaluation afterwards. Again, if you have a comment or a question, please use the chat function, and then later we'll be using the hand raising. I have a comment that we have two people speaking at the same time. So I just wanted to do a quick check on sound. Does everything seem like it's good for sound? Okay, great. Sounds great. Great, awesome, thank you. All right, so welcome again to today's webinar. My name is Emily Torres-Cullinane. I'm the Assistant Director of Strategic Initiatives. And truly excited to jump in. We have so much information that we've been collecting over the past, I'd say, month and a half internally, and as well as talking to many municipalities about what they're doing on engagement and how they're addressing the challenges that have been coming up. We've been collecting sort of issues and challenges and brainstorming ideas. So today we're going to be presenting a lot of information to you. We're not going to be able to answer everything. And today will probably be a lot of like nuggets of wisdom and things to think about, but we are here to help you. So after the meeting, if you have questions that were unanswered, please feel free to contact us. We have a wonderful team today. So Carolina Prieto, our Community Engagement Specialist, and Yolando Spinola will be doing the presentation. We have Christian Brandt and Sasha Parodi that have prepared all kinds of resources in the background, and so they will be taking a look at also the chat function for your questions and taking those into account. We also have another wonderful team that we work with at MAPC, which is from the data and digital services, planning staff that are passionate about community engagement that are also on the line, and our legal team, Margie Weinberger is also on the line that can maybe address some of your legal questions. The last thing I want to say before we get started is that we are sort of kicking off a new district local technical assistance project where in the next month or so we're going to be working very much hands-on with municipalities on their engagement needs. So after this, if you would like some hands-on facilitation or strategic planning support with your engagement, please let us know. You can contact engagement@mapc.org, and we have some funds that can support that work. Great. All right. So, well, the first thing we want to do, now that I've told you about who's on the call on our end, is we want to know who is in the room. So this is a poll that I'm going to be doing, so you can be able to see it on the screen. You should be able to see it right now. So the question is, who is in the room? And if you scroll down, you'll see it's kind of a long list. If there's anyone that we did not capture in this list, you can add who you are in the Zoom chat. and I'll just give it a moment here. It is multiple choice, so you can kind of, you know, write down generally how you identify yourself. Great, so it looks like we have a lot of planners on the call, municipal staff, some elected officials, community organizations, some students, people that are learning. Wonderful, awesome. Okay, so it looks like a lot of planners. Great, thank you so much for participating in the poll, and we'll be thinking about how we talk about some of our examples as it relates to you. All right, great. All right, so we're gonna get started. Carolina, you can take it away.
Great, so for our agenda today, we want to talk a little bit about our changing landscape in terms of community engagement and how this digital space has changed. Talk about some equity considerations we want to keep at the forefront of our conversations around digital engagement, how we can manage technology to best support our needs, achieving our engagement goals, so having clarity around what digital engagement means to you and how it's supposed to support your planning process. And then we're going to go into specific digital facilitation tips. At the end, we'll do a question and answer. And I do want to mention that we have a wonderful guide that we've been putting together and is on our MAPC website. We'll be sharing the link here in the chat, and also post this conversation that we'll be able to send out to you all, and it has a lot more detailed information, so you can really get into the weeds of the conversation. Next slide. So in terms of COVID-19's impact on community engagement, we know that they're working with a lot of fear and anxiety in terms of people feeling bombarded with information, having to manage their home lives, professional lives, and still wanting to be civically engaged. And we know that feelings on how people want to interact civically changes based on the day. So one day you may want to engage, and another day it's really not possible to do that as a resident or a participant. And we know that there's changes in in-person and events and promotions. So the events that we were depending on whether to engage people in conversation or even to use as promotional or cross-reference or as a pop-up opportunity for planning processes are no longer available. So now there's a changing shift and a need to fill that engagement in a different way. We have limited digital attention, bandwidth, time, and capacity from balancing this intersection of our home lives where our home, professional, and civic engagement is all intersecting in one space, and trying to create space where all of those things can work together, as well as digital disinformation and privacy concerns that we're all dealing with, and making sure that we're able to deliver really rich content and also keep our residents and constituents safe during that conversation. And then lastly, of course, thinking about our equity concerns and considerations that are coming up as we're being sort of put in a position to work digitally, and thinking more broadly outside of that to make sure that equity is at the forefront of the conversation. Next slide. So based on this information, we do want to point out that there is an engagement opportunity here. There is an increase connectivity, communication, and connection amongst community members. And then we've seen it all over the state, not only internally through our municipal departments and staff, but also through our partnerships and development with our community partners, residents, civic leaders, activists, artists, people really coming together and wanting to support their community and making sure that their residents are getting their needs met, and also being able to think about how to connect and participate together. Changing accessibility, and I think we've seen some of the limitations in terms of accessibility we're seeing for the digital realm, but also thinking about this changing accessibility as an opportunity for those who may have not been able to attend an evening meeting at 6 p.m., but now can really plug into a call at 10 a.m. in between, breakfast and lunch when they're trying to serve their kids, for example. So just thinking about those changing needs of accessibility and how that can really lead to creativity and expanding our reach. So this is a pretty unique opportunity, I think, because we've been forced to think about a lot more creatively and given the opportunity to think more creatively about how to reach folks and kind of getting outside of our regular outreach tactics. So it's a creative and an opportunity for us to do that. And then thinking about how this is expanding our reach. So, you know, with the opportunity to do, for example, live Facebook, live YouTube, all of these different platforms that are able to give and share communication quickly and in real time, that reach and response is improved, and we're able to do that a lot more. And then the last, thinking about awareness. So because there's more and more people either learning how to use their digital systems, being able to access different platforms, and then not only from a planning level, but also a resident level, being able to do that on a social basis, that's also bringing more opportunity for us to connect with people in that way. Next slide. So we know that there are some serious digital equity considerations when we're thinking about digital engagement, and that includes, of course, the digital divide, where there is a need for people to connect, and that understanding is limited. We have language barriers, literacy and education concerns, and lack of varied exposure to different platforms. And we can think about how to address all of these when we're thinking about our tactics and strategies for digital engagement. Next slide. So if we think about an equity approach to engagement, we want to think about centering those who are most vulnerable and leading with equity. And I think we know that at times it's very difficult for us to you know, make those tough decisions about, for example, how do we make sure we center those who are vulnerable, but also make sure that we're, being respectful of what people's immediate needs are. And I think we're considering all of those factors and understanding that everybody is living their own lived experience, and providing opportunities for people to plug in different ways is the most important way to think about it. And making it as easy as possible is really important. Having and assembling a diverse team to help you with some of those aspects of what digital engagement looks like for different populations is key. And really tapping into the expertise and partnerships of others is really going to help us really shape an approach that is equitable. And then, of course, providing a variety of ways for people to access information. And Yolanda will kind of go right into this more and more, but whether it's having ability for people to phone in, to provide input, either through snail mail, to have ways for people to give feedback through written format, etc. Just making sure there's a variety of ways to access information and give feedback is key. And then making sure we set expectations for ourselves, and we manage those expectations in the engagement, and kind of walk people through what the content is, but letting people know that sort of with this technological sort of potential barrier, there are things that people can do to open up those that communication and continue to engage people more and more. Next slide. So what does this look like from an equity lens? So technology preparation. So for example, we did do an introduction and logged in early, gave people 15 minutes to set up. And Daphne's on the call here. She had a great idea of making sure you do a technology training for people if people need it. I thought that was a great note. You can have a description of how to do technology, you can have a short video, and you can do one-on-one calls with people to make sure that they're set up properly to have that engagement that you want them to have on a digital realm. And then making sure you help people and individuals navigate and find content easily when you are setting up your technology. So not assuming that people understand where a chat box is or how to raise your hand or all those different pieces that help people understand the digital landscape and what it is, how they can sort of plug into this new context. In terms of facilitation tactics, we want to give people enough time to read and digest information. And I will say that sometimes, especially facilitating online in a digital space, it is good to pause and just check in periodically with folks to check for understanding, make sure that what you're saying is making sense to them, and have them periodically ask questions. And then, slowing down and making sure that there's an ability for people to either go into breakouts, have separate discussions, one-on-ones, or have follow-up conversations with people. Thinking about language accessibility, the things that apply in in-person meetings, we also think that should be applied in a digital space. So whether you're providing content in multiple languages, having in-space interpretation in a digital space, or digital focus groups, having all, for example, Haitian Creole, a focus group, if you're trying to do a certain planning project, that would make sense for your demographics, to do that in a way that is language accessible, and making sure it's reaching people where they are. Accessibility for people with disabilities, there's some great resources that we've posted in the conversations and in the chat and website. And there's some great partners, I'm sure, who are here that can speak to this as well. But some of the things that you can consider are closed captioning. So, digital platforms like Microsoft Teams and Zoom have closed captioning capacities. Making sure that your font and design and color scheme is accessible and is able to be digested through a reader, making sure you have good sound and people are able to check it. Sometimes in person as well, we recommend having a microphone. So thinking about whether that is something you want to apply for your digital engagement is also recommended. And then making sure you're not using content that causes any like physical reactions or movies that can be, triggering for folks. Next slide. Oh, actually go back for one. Sorry about that. Thanks. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is content geared towards different learning styles. So incorporating polling, infographics, memes, imagery, and video can be really helpful to making sure that people are staying with you in your discussions, particularly around tougher, denser, or more conflict, or different subjects that may be more potential for conflict. And next slide, please. So welcoming people to technology, making sure that we have internet preparation. So some people like to recommend having an Ethernet cable available, making sure that your broadband is able to, accept the engagement that you're asking people to do, limiting software needs. So limiting how much we're asking people to download things or create new accounts or have to sign up for something to get something, sort of making it as accessible as possible and, able to be easy to start. And then knowing your security settings is key. We can talk a lot more about that. And there is a good section in our plan about security as well, but making sure you know what your security settings are and that your team, your diverse team knows that as well is important. And then providing device options. So not assuming that everybody can just hop on a computer, but providing phone and other device options to access your digital engagement. Next slide. So in terms of dealing with digital disruption, we've been having a lot of conversations with people in different towns and cities, and just being aware that there are bad actors, and that can include online trolls, hackers, and hecklers. And so it's really key for us to become proficient in the software we decide to use. In terms of Zoom bombing, we've been hearing a lot about this in the news, and it has been happening across the country. And just there are so many different settings and things that you can do to prevent Zoom bombing. And some of those include, for example, not making sure that you disable video, that you don't allow people to change their profile pictures, to make sure you have additional co-hosts, to disable annotation. Those are just some of the examples, and happy to answer any questions about that. Think about leading with real identifiers. So asking people to identify themselves where you can, and reducing online anonymity to help protect the security of folks. And then making clear that digital attacks will be reported to authorities, and that you can do that right at the beginning of any of your meetings, just to ensure that people are aware that action will be taken. And then decide on open virtual meeting versus streaming virtual meetings, and what level of meeting interaction you want to have. And Yolanda will talk a little bit more about that and what that can look like. And then considerations around open meeting law. And I know that there have been a lot of questions about this coming in. And Margie, maybe you can give us an update. There's supposed to be another meeting tomorrow about that, and an update on what that looks like and how this interacts with digital engagement. So we can kind of go into that a little bit later. Next slide. So at the end of the day, we're really trying to balance, evaluate and balance security and privacy of those individuals who are participating, but also to promote participation and collaboration. And I think with working with all of you and continuing our communication with each other, we're able to find and strike a balance that works for everybody. So we know it's difficult. We know it's not something that is easily kind of figured out, and it's really more an art than a science here. And I think as the more that we can communicate with each other what our strategies are, we can sort of delve into making sure that balance is able to happen. Next slide. Lastly, I want to just say that our digital community needs to be built and nurtured. It's not just software. And I think this is really important because we can all sort of give people instructions on how to get online, how to use the technology, how to do all of that. But there's a lot more than that, and making sure that we're able to appropriately facilitate and get people what they need in order to get the planning outcomes that we're looking for is key. And you want to make sure that we're, being respectful and just in the way that we're asking people to engage digitally. Next slide. And so we want to know from you all, there's 122 people on the call here. What are you doing for engagement that is working for you? So it looks like Gideon said that he paid for an extra phone number call-in, and we had a commission member who could not participate otherwise. Okay, so I'm going to keep reading these and kind of feel free to keep adding your thoughts and ways that you are doing engagement right now. So Dana says that she tries to do a thumbs up and a thumbs down check as calls start to see where folks are. Yeah, I like to do midway calls. So if I just had a really dense information I'm sharing, I do like thumbs up if you're feeling great, thumbs in the middle if you're kind of understanding, thumbs down if you don't know what I'm talking about. Those are all good kind of cues that you can give people. Josephine, yes, the research page does include specific information about Zoom bombing and the settings. The settings are key. So please look at that if you have questions. So one of the things that we've learned is, disabling screen share, disabling annotation, all those things can be used to Zoom bomb. Those are really important. It looks like Barry says you post the call-in and ID number for Google Meet for each meeting as part of the agenda. So just to give people clarity on how to get there. We do that as well in terms of getting it on the Outlook calendar and making it as easy as possible so that people just have to click and get on. Mary says she's not bothering with passwords, that we have tech hosts separate from the chair who runs a meeting in a pure technical sense. Yes, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit more with Yolanda's part. Great, so keep them coming. I'm just gonna hand it over to Yolanda to continue, and I'll try to answer some of these in the chat or in our Q&A.
Great, thank you, Carolina, appreciate all of that. So on my section, I wanna share some different forms of engagement and nuggets for you to incorporate into your engagement that you're doing digitally. But before I even jump into that, I just want you all to think about what are your engagement goals and what is it that you want to achieve digitally and with the stakeholders that you are bringing into your projects. So you want to reflect on those to figure out which form of engagement is best for you and your stakeholders. So once you reflect on your engagement goals, some forms of engagement work better than others. So I'm going to highlight today 4 different versions, 4 different types of engagements, and then you should think about like how they can be used in your project. The first one is one that we're very much used to, and we've probably have built it out for our projects in the past, which is the old-fashioned web landing page. So it could easily get 300 to 1,000 people participating in just visiting these web pages. What I have right now up is an example of the Plymouth Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness project. And that's a landing page that we built out as almost like a virtual workshop. So people visited the landing page and they can access all the information that they need in order to participate in the project. The Plymouth MVP was going to be a in-person engagement experience, but due to COVID-19, they pivoted into to a virtual workshop format where people can consume different pieces of content in video form. They can also read the content that they needed in their own pace, and then they can respond to an embedded survey that is available on the landing page. So landing pages have typically been more static and have always been a one-way communication method, but I think we can start to build them to be more two-way interaction pieces for our engagement moving forward. What we are executing today and that a lot of people might be experimenting with is the webinar event format. It easily can, you can easily have 20 to 300 different stakeholders participating in this format. We're using it for our staff meetings, and it's definitely a good way to like share content with a large group of folks, and they will be able to participate with some limitations depending on how you set it up on the back end. So that's something to think about if it would work for you and your projects and the stakeholders that you're trying to engage. The live online meeting is something that is 2 to 20 participants are usually participating in it. Sometimes a little bit more. It's great for your committee meetings or for working groups. It's an opportunity to convene people, and it's more participatory, so people can easily unmute themselves, comment in the chat. Unlike the webinar format, it allows for a lot more interactions, and people can dig deeper into content and topics. So we definitely encourage you to look into this for your projects or for convening a small group of folks together. The DEDM is currently working on a master plan, and they pivoted into using both the online webinar format, and they have also experimented with the small live online meeting format. They were going to originally do in-person engagement, but due to COVID-19, they have experimented with these, and they've seen a lot of success in just engaging folks in DEDM around using these different strategies. We are writing a case study, and you will find that available on the link that is being made available in the chat, and that will be on the MAPC's webpage. So definitely check out the DEDM master plan case study just to understand how they were best able to use these different formats. Digital facilitation is something that the more you work on it, the more you figure out how it works for your project, the more robust you can build out your experience for your stakeholders. And we have a lot of tips and tricks on that our webpage that will share some different virtual meeting best practices or shared practices in regards to facilitation, and just like how to set things up on the back end so that you can execute it for your stakeholders. Just a quick tip that we've been incorporating into our virtual facilitation is having different roles for our staff in order to accomplish these engagement experiences. We have a live online facilitator who is moving the agenda along, checking for understanding, recapping certain knowledge. Emily is doing that basically today. You might have a tech whiz, somebody who's monitoring the mics, checking cameras, troubleshooting any issues in the chat, or is available for folks outside of the virtual meeting. Even if you make a phone line available, people can call in and troubleshoot issues with the tech whiz. And you might also have a staff person who is just coordinating the chat and is sharing links, collecting ideas, clarifying pieces in the chat. And we have folks doing that today too. And then you might want to have somebody just focusing on just the content. And both Carolina and I are doing that today, sharing key ideas, sharing out anecdotes and our experiences. So sometimes it's best to have that person just hone in on the content and let other people sort some of the back end stuff or sort out some of the agenda pieces. But we understand that it might be hard for some of you all in your municipalities or at your institutions to have the capacity to have all these different roles, and that you might have to be like a master host and wear multiple different hats. So hats off to you all for being able to do that. But for those who, if you need that support, I strongly encourage you to connect with different partners on ground in your municipalities to figure out like how you guys can support each other in order to divvy up some of these roles to accomplish things. And definitely reach out to us too if you need support and some guidance, and we can see how we can leverage our capacity to make sure your projects move forward. And we can connect you with some other partners too if we know any on ground. Some key digital event features for you all to consider. Carolina mentioned some of these, but I hope to dig just a little deeper into them. Icebreakers and activities are things that we have already incorporated in in-person engagement experiences, and they should also be incorporated into the digital space. And I actually think they're even more valuable in the digital space. So definitely think about what are those icebreaker questions and activities that you can do throughout your experience, your engagement experiences digitally. And think about recording your virtual meetings and making them available afterwards for anyone who is not able to attend your meetings. Recording the meeting does have you should reflect with your your institution and think about like what are the requirements that you have to go through. At MAPC, we reflect that Massachusetts is a dual consent state, so you need to have consent from the participants who are being recorded, and they have to provide that consent either verbally or using the like just checking it off. Zoom does have the ability to allow to tell people that they're being recorded and they have to check it off in Zoom. But if you're not using Zoom, you would need to just let participants know, and they need to give their authorization. At least that's what we are doing on our end, and we strongly encourage you to look into it and do that same thing. Casual networking is a feature that has been in engagement, naturally, and it has happened with whatever events that we hosted prior, and we need to bring that into the digital space, and people really appreciate it. Casual networking is just making some time available before the webinar or before the meeting, and people are arriving a little early just to get themselves settled in and figure out maybe some of the tech features. And it also allows people to connect on like how things are going day to day, back at the office, or how things are going personally. So it's good just to make that time available for people to have some casual networking time for themselves. Allow people to do a quick check-in using the chat feature or the polling questions. People might want to know like who's in the room like we did today, but you can design those polling questions for your own specific meeting so that you're getting data that you want, but then you can also quickly share that data with the other stakeholders. And then breakout rooms, it allows people to just dig deeper into the content. So we strongly encourage you to look into how you can use breakout rooms, share slides and screens so that the content isn't just floating heads all the time, but that you can have a more dynamic presentation. So you might want to share slides or share links so people have different ways of consuming content. Videos and graphics and pictures are a great way to like make your presentation more dynamic. So we definitely encourage you to do that instead of just, again, being a floating head. And recapping ideas and debriefing what you have shared during the general meeting is always a good idea, because some people just need the 3 main takeaways so that they can do their own work behind the scenes. And then think about how you can add the human element into your digital experiences. Many times we forget to add, us into the project and adding us into the concepts that we're sharing. So make sure that you're sharing like who you are, maybe a bio, tell people your title, some fun facts about yourself and your organization. It always helps to make the information more personal. And then ask your participants to also tell them, have them share a little bit about themselves with you and other participants. Maybe it might be a short bio. If you have guest speakers, have them do the same thing. Think about hosting Ask Me Anythings or open office hours where people can just come and talk to you with slightly less structure, and they can ask questions as they come up in their mind. So just think about how you can add these informal opportunities for people to connect with you and understand some of the human elements behind some of the content that you're sharing. Fun elements are always something to incorporate and keep people engaged and keep them coming back. You might want to gamify your engagement experience. Maybe there's ways that you can add points into the experience, add quizzes or surveys or polls. Today we have the Zoom polling feature that we're illustrating, but there's many other software and tools that you can use to just keep things more dynamic and interesting for the participants. Like Poll Everywhere is another software tool that we use at MAPC. Encourage people to use GIFs, stickers, to use the thumbs up feature in Zoom. It just keeps things a little bit more fresh and interesting and dynamic. So definitely look into allowing for that. Sometimes our projects require us to be a little bit more formal, but if your projects allows for that freedom and creativity, maybe you can incorporate that. Same thing with like scavenger hunts in the landing page. Allow people to go deeper into the content by just building that out into the actual project and the content that you're sharing. You can also think about ways to like add prizes or adding original content that people can only get at this specific time. It's a good way just to have people know that they need to engage now in order to receive the information that they need. And then you might want to share stories, because stories go a long way sometimes with just getting people interested. Sometimes they can be bombarded by information, but stories is a good way to like share anecdotes that gives people a different image of the project. And then keep in mind time and place. There's sometimes that you can add certain elements of fun, but depending on your stakeholder and your situation, you might not be able to add all those elements. So it depends on the project and depends on your stakeholders that you are engaging. Think about making sure your experience is mobile friendly. Significant amount of the public is engaging in online engagement experiences online using their phone. So if you are not building engagement experiences that allow people to engage with on their phone, you're missing a big piece of the public. So definitely check to see if your landing page or your virtual meetings or the content that you're sharing is able to be digestible in phones, tablets, and computers. So you want to check on those different devices. Using Google's mobile friendly testing tool is a way to evaluate your website and some of the content that you're creating to see if it is if it is digestible in phone format. And you're not always going to be able to engage everyone at one time and just convene everyone to participate in a piece of content at once. So you should allow people to follow up later on and get the information that they need, and so that they can consume it at their own pace and respond and provide input whenever they're ready. Connect with partners locally to see how you can do this. You don't want to recreate something that's already existing, but maybe you might want to create a Slack microsite where people can chat about something, chat about certain topics and move projects forward without convening them in a meeting, or maybe after a meeting, they're having this conversation over Slack. But also email is something that has done this prior to Slack, and a lot of people are comfortable with it. Just email listservs or email chains that allow people to have a thread and a conversation over time. Facebook groups are doing this nowadays, and a lot of people are engaging in it. So you can create a Facebook group just for a specific project, and people are able to like work on a specific topic over a long period of time, and they consume the content at their own pace. And Twitter and Instagram hashtags are a way of doing this with specific topics. So just adding those hashtags and people can continue the conversation outside the fact. It does require some work to make sure you can find the content and just being comfortable with it. The YouTube comment section is basically, it's an opportunity for people to comment on a specific video over time. So it's a good way to just check on the input that people are sharing. Reddit boards are doing the same thing, or you can create your own document library for your specific project, and that's like on a landing page. Eventually, we will start to transition back into these in-person engagement experiences. But like Carolina said earlier, we are experimenting with certain digital tools now that I think will stay with us. And I strongly encourage you to play around with these tools, because eventually we can mix them into our regular in-person engagement experiences, and it will significantly increase the value of the input that we're gathering in the future. So you will see more opportunities for people to engage both digitally and in person, and it will create a more robust projects and opportunities for people. We definitely want to now just take some time for you all to ask some questions of us and the rest of our team. So we will definitely make that available to you all. Again, you can definitely ask us questions after today, and you can reach us at engagement@mapc.org.
Thank you so much for that, Yolando. Thank you, Carolina. And so we've been receiving lots of questions through the chat, and we've been answering some as we go, and then we've been keeping track. A lot of them have been around facilitation, technology, some around equity and access. Yolando, could you actually stop the presentation? That way I can kind of see people a little better. Okay, and one of the things that I like to do is I like to look at the gallery view so I can see you all, get a little bit of connection here. If you have a question that you would verbally like to ask, I ask that you use the participants button and raise your virtual hand, and then we will unmute you. So I am doing a quick scan here. The way you do that is you hit participants, and then you can scroll over your name, and then you click a button that has a hand. And I'm not seeing any quite yet. If you're on the phone, you just press *9, and I can see you. All right, so I'm not seeing hands. However, yes.
I just see a comment here from Jenny, and I wanted to just respond to it. She said here, I've also seen meeting hosts ask people to rename themselves with your organization, position, or hometown, etc., which I think can be great in some instances, but we have found that that is sort of a risk that you're taking in terms of Zoom bombing or somebody hijacking a conversation with the rename. So just take that into consideration. You can also ask people to register ahead of time and make that part of their profile as they sign in. So then that's sort of a requirement for them. And they cannot also change their name after they have signed in. So that's something to consider. But I think if it's a group that you may know, that's a fun way to engage with people as well.
Another question we got was around icebreakers. I think there's a lot of ideas that came about, and you know, these meetings can really, we're finding that 60 to 90 minutes is really the maximum people can sort of take in. And so if you wanted to add in a little bit of connection time, you could have people jump on the call a little earlier. There's a couple of ideas around, you know, using emoji to describe yourself and people sort of punching in that. Maybe, I think Jenny shared something about finding something blue and everyone sort of holding something blue that's like around them. There's all kinds of, you know, questions that you can kind of ask. I've seen the high five. So if you take your hand and do a high five to the person to your left or your right, kind of do a little connection there. I see some of you doing it. There you go.
It looks like Sue has a question here.
Okay, Sue. All right, Sue, yes.
Thank you. Everything sounds a little bit less complex, even though it's all complex to create today, regarding, I'd say, smaller meetings. I actually found out today the reason why I didn't get on to the school committee meeting that had already started. The 300 people, that was the maximum that actually could participate, but I could watch it on TV. As a selectman, I am concerned about how we'll be able to have a quality representative town meeting that I think is likely to be remote. And also, just for the short, long haul, you know, how to have citizens comfortably participate in board meetings. So I've gotten some good hints so far, and I think this has been fabulous. But anyway, are you thinking about the larger meetings, the town meetings, etc.?
Yolanda or Carolina, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think this conversation around quality town meeting has been coming up a lot, as a lot of them have been pushed. And I would kind of open it up to folks in the chat and also people who are here. I know, Margie, we've also been kind of in some discussions around how does that interact with, you know, open meeting law, and also how, you know, the difference between that and getting something passed. is like a distinction that needs to be made. I know Jenny too has been working on a lot of these kinds of meetings.
And Caroline, I'm sorry to cut you off, but in terms of the technology, I do think there are some programs that can handle more than 300. And I know we just upgraded our Zoom to Zoom webinar, and that's how we're going to try to be doing some of these larger meetings. So you might be something for the municipality to kind of check on their technology and see if there's an upgrade.
You need
Matt,
to check your licensing to see.
Yeah, I did want to jump on that. So basically the default capacity for Zoom meetings is 300, but then they offer add-ons that can expand that capacity as well. So basically, if it's something that you know you're going to be having more than that, it might be something you consider getting the add-on for. One of the ways that we've considered to expand that capacity, though, is to also live stream to platforms like Facebook Live or YouTube, where there isn't actually a capacity consideration as much as there is for Zoom. So basically, if people are just going to be viewing it, they can go to one of those sources instead of having to join the meeting directly.
So the difference between town meeting and open meeting, obviously, is the requirement for making access for participation for the public. And while you can be a little more experimental, I'd say, in open meetings and presentations, being a town meeting itself, because it's gathering votes and is generally open to public comment, webinar can be a bit of an issue for that. So you have to think about the multi types of media that you can use, including telephone, where people can have a telephone number that may be call forwarded, never use somebody's personal telephone number, but maybe a government office telephone number can be call forwarded and questions can be gathered. And you can give the opportunity for people to send in emails to a neutral email that you've created for the meeting, so that you can get real-time questions that come in. Giving access to the public doesn't always mean you have to see them or they have to have their voice heard, but their thoughts have to be available. And so as long as you give multimedia ways of doing that so that no one is caught not being able to communicate, you will satisfy the open meeting laws. That said, there is an open meeting law training at the Attorney General's tomorrow. I sent the link to that to Emily and to Elise, and she can share that with you. I don't know that it's going to be overly helpful because some of the new, nothing against the Attorney General's office, I come from there, but the new remote meetings is a new technology, and they're just feeling their way through. So while there will be opportunity for some questions on that, it is not going to be just on remote meetings.
great, thank you so much. There's a question here from Haween. Haween, I'm going to unmute you. Can you ask your question?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to
Yes.
sorry. I wanted to reply to Sue. What we've been doing is we've been putting a call out to the public, and they've been able to email their public comments, which they have been providing to all of the, we have town councilors, but they've been providing all that information to them in advance of the meeting. So they put out like a call and say, please send us any of your comments about the budget or whatever is the topic of the day through the town manager's office, and then they're all read and provided to the counselors. So I hope that's helpful. That's how we're doing it.
Great, thank you so much. I see a question from Elodia. I'm unmuting you. Elodia?
Thank you. Yes, could you speak to the connection between the Zoom meeting, which is recorded, and local cable stations? Our town is only allowing one meeting at a time. I live in Watertown, and I would assume that if this is recorded, that one could give the recording to the cable station to transmit at the same time or at a later date. Has anybody run into this?
We've done that with the Dedham Master Plan, and that seemed to work fine. And they were able to stream that afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
No problem. Looks like Edward has a question.
You're unmuted now.
Yeah, my question is primarily, I just want to make sure heard the presentation correctly about the equitable approach. So you're saying as long as it's like a multifaceted approach with respect to giving people the option to comment and or participate in the meeting, either that be from a virtual perspective or a snail mail perspective, as well as providing the opportunity for, accessibility access, both language and for disabilities and things like that, that would be viewed as a normal standard as equity, like not non-equitable, but the basic standard of what we would believe to be an equitable approach.
So that's going to give you some access, but it's not going to guarantee equity. So what that would mean is that you would have to look at your demographic region, people who are affected by the topics that you're actually working on, and see if they are, either directly or indirectly impacted by what you're doing. And then you would have to make sure you take steps to engage those people. Whether or not you provide something doesn't mean that you're necessarily being equitable. So it's really, you may have to do extra work. So like, for example, in DETA, I think it's like 20% population that has a disability. So we might have to do some extra work to either work with partners, because if we're not getting any feedback from the disability community, but we're providing accessibility, that doesn't mean that we're being equitable in our engagement.
All right, I guess just to break it down a little further, I'm the Chief of Staff of the Civic Engagement Cabinet for Mayor Walsh. So I oversee the Office of Neighborhood Services and all the public outreach. So we do have a demographic breakdown on every single neighborhood in the city and how we approach it. And we set our standards specific to that demographic breakdown as we see fit, primarily through our language access office that I also help oversee. So I just want to make sure, because we're getting into this situation where we're going to have to approach people from not only just like zoning board of appeal, but just everyday type activities. And I have the breakdown. I just want to make sure that when I do approach communities, understanding that I'm taking that demographic information into consideration, that when I do produce or utilize some sort of platform, be it webinar, Zoom, Co-Urbanize, whatever, we end up deciding would be the best situation, that we are hitting everything that you showed on that presentation from not only like an imagery perspective, but also from just making sure that the options are there and they relate to what the consistent neighborhood demographic would be from our understanding. And if that would be sufficient as an overall approach toward equity and accessibility.
Yeah, I think that it's a great start. I mean, it's ongoing, right? We can't just say like we did the things and now it's done and we're good. We accomplished equity. That's not really how it works.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying is that like if we sort of go through that list and we sort of check ourselves in those areas, does that get us there? I do think that yes, it helps us maintain a consistent message, and we can tell people what we've done. But I think maintaining open communication and listening constantly is the only way we can reach that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to make sure going into it, we have a solid foundation based on principles that we discussed here today. And that in my approach, or in our approach overall throughout the Commonwealth and the city of Boston, those are key features.
We have an equity analysis and a process that we go through that, and particularly through our community engagement strategies. And that's done through every planning process. And I know we have 2 minutes, but we can talk offline and get more into that.
Yeah, I would definitely love to.
Thank you for that question. And I actually really wanted to answer, someone who's on the phone has their hand raised, and I would like to answer your question. I think we have 1 more minute, the 508 number.
Hello.
Hello, we hear you.
Yes, I would say it was a basic question on, I guess this meeting, I tried to attempt to get onto the Zoom and I couldn't. Now I'm on the phone, but I couldn't even get onto it through my browser. So I'm not sure, does Zoom support all browsers?
Matt, is that a question you can answer?
Yeah, I would say that it supports most mainstream browsers if you're using Chrome or Internet Explorer. But
I'm using Microsoft Edge.
Edge. I haven't personally tested it with that. I could take a look if that is a compatibility issue, but yeah, to my knowledge, it should be able to work.
Okay,
Great.
so on Monday, I participated in a meeting and was able to at least view the meeting through Microsoft Edge, but I'm not even able to view this meeting through Microsoft Edge today. So that was my only concern. But overall, this has been a great presentation.
Thank you so much. And we are recording the presentation. We will be sending this out. We are also live streaming on Facebook. So that's another sort of place to access, you know, if you don't have accessibility on like Zoom. But we're going to close it out. Thank you so much for everyone's input. Again, this is a work in progress. We are sort of kicking off this effort at MAPC. The next month or so, we're going to be really tracking and collecting all of your questions and your issues. We're working with digital services, our data services, our legal team, our communications team, our community engagement team, our passionate land use staffers around how to solve and really head on these issues. We do feel this will be a work, you know, in progress and throughout the year. And whatever we have, we'll continue to share on our website. And again, please feel free to contact us. We're here to help brainstorm together. So thank you everyone for your time and for all the work that you're doing during this time. You know, it's wonderful. We have a wonderful afternoon. Hope you can join us next week for our webinar on supporting small businesses. Have a wonderful afternoon and stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.